The special advisor on media and public communications to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Mr. Sunday Dare, says trade and investments remains key to ensuring that Africa returns to the path of economic growth. Mr. Dare said this in Ibadan during the official inauguration of the Oyo State Sub-National Africa Continental Free Trade Area Implementation Strategy. According to him, this is an era where Africa has departed from rule-based trade and investment to a tariff regime imposed by the West. He said that Nigeria must leverage on trade and investments, on what it produces, and also develop a value chain that would bring the revenues that was needed to build the nation. The presidential aide said that the regional strategy approach was very much in alignment with President Bola Tinubu's agenda. Mr. Dare said that the president's agenda places emphasis on trade-led growth, industrialization, and building South-South partnerships that create jobs, strengthen value chains, and accelerate AfCFTA's vision. My guest live in the Lagos studio is Mr. Sunday Dare, Special Advisor to President Bola Tinubu on media and public communications. Good afternoon. It's good to have you here live.
Thank you, Tolu.
Yes. I think I should start with my introduction. Let me take it from that introduction. AfCFTA. I know it's the way to go. They just concluded the IATF and all of that. A lot of discussions around Nigeria's economy. You said it's key, but is Nigeria ready? Are we ready to play in this market?
Nigeria is already playing in that market. I know quite a number of legislations have been gazetted under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. An air cargo corridor for the ease of goods and services into the country has also been opened. So Nigeria is already a player. Don't forget, beyond the continental partnership, there's the regional, that is the ECOWAS protocol on free movement of goods and services, all the encumbrances that have held it down over time. Of course, we know that there's been a movement towards common currency. It has been impeded. But in spite of that, now we have the PAPS payment system, Pan-African payments, which is novel. There's also the volume of $2 billion under AFTA, where countries can pull in order to boost trade. So Nigeria is already plugged in, no doubt about it.
It's a good way to start our conversation, but leveraging on trade and investment and where our capacity, where our strength is, what would you say about our manufacturers and what really Nigeria has to export out?
Well, first, there are strong indicators. We ended last week with a 67% increase in manufactured goods, a very strong indicator. We ended last week with another strong indicator in terms of trade surplus. You know, you look at the balance of import and export. The bane of our economy has always been that import far outstrips export. Now, what we're saying, what these figures are telling us, two key things: that importation and consumption of imported goods is coming down, while production and export of what we produce, Nigerians are beginning to consume more of what we produce. And that's why I have the balance, the surplus balance of trade of 7.4 billion. Now, that coming just 2 years under the reforms also says a lot. That means the reforms we have ongoing by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is beginning to make the impact that is needed.
IATF is coming to Nigeria in 2027. I spoke to Dr. Jumoke Oduwole last Wednesday, and I think, are we also ready for that? That's the big one.
Well,
what opportunities are there for us?
The minister has a hand wrapped around it. Let me back up a bit. You know, after Nigeria, and particularly President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was picked about a year ago as an AFTA champion. And that didn't just come simply as a dash. It was based on the policies and initiatives and what the Honorable Minister of Trade and Investment has articulated. Of course, you know that she's on top of her game, and I think Nigeria is ready. Now, why do you say Nigeria is ready? In Ibadan last week, we saw that out of 519 states in the African continent, Oyo State was the first to set up or to sign that protocol, the implementation strategy. And the focus is leveraging on what you produce. I did say on Friday that we need to return back to when we have the cocoa-driven economy, the granite-driven economy, the palm oil-driven economy, away from the oil-driven economy. And we're beginning to see that diversification. Under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, we've had the return of the commodity boards. The cocoa commodity board is back. The grains board is coming back. So the whole idea is that you must leverage on what you produce develop a value chain that adds value to what you produce. And when you export eventually, the revenue that comes in can be plugged back into growth and development for your economy.
Let me take you to the reforms. Let's talk about the reforms. Yeah. We've seen 2 years now, bold steps taken by President Bola Tinubu. But according to the figures that we see, inflation, GDP growth figures, and even from the likes of IMF and World Bank, we continue to see positive outlook. What is your overview of where we stand at the moment?
Absolutely. I think that when you look at the figures, I call them the green numbers, you know, both monetary and fiscal figures. You get the comfort from the fact that these policies that we have had are beginning to impact very well. Oftentimes, it takes about 3 years before you really get the impact showing. But this time around, because of the strength and the potential of our economy, and because of the timeliness of those reforms, imagine if President Bola Tinubu did not go ahead to remove the subsidy in oil, or he did not go ahead to unify the forex market. Where will we be? We're at the point now that we have the volatility is gone in the forex market. We're down to 1,500, 1,510, and that's hung on. Before, almost every day, it was shooting up 1,700. So there's stability, and we must recognize that. There's also overall stability in the economy, and we have to also recognize that. So these policies are playing well. We started with oil subsidy removal. We hit 1,250 per liter. What the market says in terms of competition, market forces, that over time, if well implemented, you will see a drop. We're now down to 820 as at yesterday when Dangote brought down his own price. Now, when you look at across the sub-region, our own price per liter is still the lowest. Forget what some pundits have said out there. You go to Ghana, it's 1,990. You go to Kenya, it's about the high is about 2,000. So we're still selling our own oil. The pump price is still the lowest, and it's still go lower.
So you think that that competition that is expected in a deregulated market, are you saying that that is happening in Nigeria?
Absolutely. You see, the rules cannot change for Nigeria. The rules of engagement when it comes to competition, when it comes to unleashing market forces, when it comes to government taking its hand off completely and allowing the forces to play their role. That's what we see in the forex market. That's what we see in the oil production market. It goes back to what we all learned in school. Supply and demand. When, you know, that's it. It determines the price. And that's what we're seeing. Nigeria is returning back to the principles of 21st century market economy. And you look at our tax act that has come in force right now. You look at the internally generated revenue. We've even met our target. Never in a long time has that ever happened. So you're seeing the recalibration of the economy, the re-engineering of the levers that we need to push. And you need a bold president who understands the dynamics of the 21st century modern economy to take those decisions.
So achieving our revenue target in August, I think above 20 trillion naira from the non-oil space.
Exactly.
Brilliant stuff. Our budget is still above about 54, 50.
Which is insufficient for a population of 230 million.
So how, well, that's true. Now, I'm looking at, are we getting the balance? Oil and gas is also still very productive.
Yes.
How do we balance this up? Because we still need to balance it up.
Well, you see, it's a constant, it's a process. No country ever balances. You know, about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, there was this debate about loans and foreign loans and the rest. Wait a minute, press the button. The foreign debt of America is $37 trillion. That of Nigeria, and what's America's population? 300 million. Reputed to be the #1 capitalist. And capitalism is fueled and funded by loans and credits. Now, what's our own debt in dollars? About 91. Then you look at our debt, our tax to debt ratio, or our debt to GDP ratio. We're still, you know, sub 40, sub 41.
So within the threshold.
South Africa is 70%. Ghana is 90%.
We're still within the threshold.
We're still within the threshold. So, you see, borrowing is a legitimate tool for growth and development. That's the standard across the world. And it cannot change. These rules cannot change. I know that, you know, there's a rough patch. we've been going through a rough patch. Nigerians have been going through a rough patch. But it's a patch that is necessary. You know, that road that is less traveled, we need to travel that road to get to where the developed economies will point to as examples. To get there, we need to take this road.
You talked about the tax laws, which is also something very key for me, and implementation should start by 2026.
January 2026.
It's a pre-election year, that's one.
Sure.
And also, many are already talking about the fossil fuel aspect, though the minister has come out to claim
the
that 5% on because that's also something, another burden.
That's settled. It's been there before 2007, the FEMA Act is there. And there's a clarity. You know, I think this government, under President Bola Tinubu, is very upfront, and we must admit that. When there's a controversy, when there's a misunderstanding about a particular issue, the government is upfront in making sure that the facts are laid on the table. And where it still remains so controversial, the president has shown is able to withdraw that. Look at the 5% on telecoms. Yeah, you know, the debate was on, and he pulled it back. Look at the CBN tax, whatever. This same president, that's a president who is at home with his people, who has empathy, who understands that at some point you need to pull back a bit to allow the people to ease off some of the burdens. And that's what we're seeing now. So the 5% thing on fossil tax won't come. But also importantly, he said unless the Minister of Finance writes to the president to say, bring it back or activate it, it won't happen. So I think as far as I'm concerned, Nigerians need not worry, there's no additional 5% tax.
But what do you think of the implementation of the entire document in its entirety from 2026? Yes, the tax laws.
When you look at from the point of its introduction,
yes,
you saw the debate it activated, which President Bola Tinubu welcomed. Even though there were efforts to pull it back, it did what was right constitutionally. He said, let it go to the People's Parliament. Let it be debated at the public hearing. Let it go to the House of Representatives. Let it go through the Senate. Let it go through the rubric of democratic process and legislation. That's what happened. From governors, from civil society groups, individuals, media houses, all parties came up with their comments there. Eventually what we got was a pristine document in line with the tax regimes we've seen in other. As we speak, Brazil, after 40 years, now has a new tax system that will come into effect in maybe 2027 or thereabouts. So that document is ready to be implemented because it's a pristine document that has taken care of what is necessary in our tax system.
Now, I'm going to ask you this now. Following the fallout of this reforms, and I know you've had this question in many interviews like this one, many will tell you that the vulnerable ones, they still have one thing, they still sing the same song. High cost of living, food prices, and all of it. So many would say, what is government really doing specifically to address the yearnings of the people? The macro seems to be working. But what about the micro?
We're down to the micro. So let's connect the dots.
Let's do that.
In economies where you have the kind of reforms that has been onboarded under this administration, where you find similar reforms, what happens? You create a social safety net, which is what Okonjo-Iweala, which is what the World Bank. And what they've been saying is you have a social safety net structure in place. They're saying there's a need to scale it up. And what are we talking about? We have about 5 million vulnerable families that have benefited from the 75,000. We have those that are getting 5,000, the vulnerables, every month. That's part of the social safety net. The NEF fund itself, subsidizing the education of our young ones and then getting 20,000 stipend. That's a safety net for our young people. The money that's going to 1.5 billion going to ginger producers, that's part of the safety net because it's targeting every group to kind of provide some succor. Then you come to health. Critical. We have about 5,000 primary health centers. Over 1,000 are already reinvigorated, and that's the continuum. You have the National Health Insurance Scheme that the President has directed that should come back. Just last week, and I just said it this morning, 29 billion naira was released to all the states, including the FCT, for what is called the social health insurance. 2 levels, one for civil servants, one for every Nigerian. You just walk up, you have an ID, you register, and you can benefit from it. So you're beginning to see whatever is coming out of subsidy, that's saved from subsidy, whatever is coming out of the reforms and the pains that goes with it, You're seeing policies that are helping to ease the pain thereof.
Was this really expected that this fallout would be as bad as this? Because many would say Mr. Sunday Dare was in the last administration. Now you're here. So many would say, what do you make of both administrations?
Don't forget that with the last administration, subsidy was in play.
Yes.
Under this administration, subsidy.
Yes.
Under the last administration, arbitrage was king. You could become an instant billionaire once you have access. This president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, came and shut that door. Now, those are two big major adjustments. You pull two big subsidies. Yes, there will be adjustments that need to be made. And that's what we saw. And we've seen a government that has moved quickly to deal with that. Let me tell you, I think one of the biggest social safety program that we'll experience eventually, which is already coming up, is the Renewed Hope World Development Program, which the president announced about 3.5 weeks ago, targeting 9,809 words and also targeting 1,000 entrepreneurs and those involved in some kind of production. What that does, it does two things. It brings the kind of development and empowerment we want bottom up. What we have had hitherto is a lot of top bottom. This bottom up. That's one. Two, it has the potential to create jobs because you are targeting 1,000 businesses, entrepreneurs, activities at that low level. It expands. It also helps us now deal with the urban, the rural-urban drift. It gives us the possibility of a reversal. Okay. You can have now, people now go, now that the money is being pumped to the grassroots, people will leave the urban centers. They go back, they try agriculture. You join the value chain. You try some other, artisans will go back. Now, if that program takes up fully, when you do the math, 9,807 words, and then 1,000 entrepreneurs and the businesses at that level. Now, that's the way you address it. It's always a multifaceted approach. There's no silver bullet when it comes to this. Now, we have an administration that is looking at all possible points, all possible valves to make sure that, this economy is reinvigorated, but also care is taken for the vulnerable, for the women, and for the young people.
And this has to be properly managed. For me, I think that is also something that is key.
Absolutely. The implementation is, I always say that the 30-pound gorilla in the room is implementation.
Yeah, it is.
Best policies often suffer and die on the basis of implementation. And I think that this administration is mindful about this implementation. Okay. That's why, as policies are announced, over time, you also see that the process of implementation. Let me give an example that really gladdens my heart. The health fellows. Many of us did not know that process had started. Yeah. And they have been onboarded. 774 health fellows spread across the local government. And then the president was gracious enough, based on a request by the minister, to say after your 1 year, you're going to get employed. Now, it might look a bit very minimal, but that's important and is the starting point.
Impact. I agree with you. Let's talk about agriculture before we wrap this up. Food. That's very important.
Security.
Food security.
And food sovereignty.
And President Tinubu is always talking about
it. It's on the top of the agenda.
Where are we? Mechanization. He also talked about signing in the mechanization program at this meeting, one of the meetings at the Villa. Yeah, so where are we with that? Insecurity is also something that is hitting up the farms.
Well, so that's loaded, isn't it? Okay. So I was on a trip to Brazil. And that trip to Brazil signed 5 major MOUs. One of them has to do with agriculture. Recall that we have the GIP with Brazil, which is 1.1 billion, signed in 2019, but now fully in effect. And you're looking at job creation of almost 100,000 and over 500,000 indirect jobs. You're looking at full mechanization, partnership with Nigeria. That is already in place. The Minister of Agriculture spoke 3 days ago on Arise and spoke to the fact that fertilizers for the planting season were shared free across the country by this government. Now, when you look at farming and agriculture, you're looking at 2 key inputs. You're looking at the fertilizer input to boost production, but you're looking at also pests control. Part of the understanding with Brazil is their pest control system is about the most advanced. So the right partnerships have been strong. From Belarus the other time, we had 2,000 tractors and about 20,000 implements, which was launched in Abuja by Mr. President. Now, connect that with what is happening in the cocoa belt of the Southwest, or the grains belt of Greening in Kaduna and the rest, where now we have millionaires. Unlike before, when they were completely, and TVC had done a compelling story about that. And I think that it's important to note that the mop-up when it comes to security, with regard to agriculture, is taking place gradually. Again, I say there's no silver bullet when it comes to insecurity. But you see a government adept at mopping up all the insecure areas and opening the path for our farmers to stay longer on the farm. And I think, you know, we've seen that the price of food are coming down, farmers are returning to their farms, and the fight against insurgency will continue.
We expect inflation figure for the month of August to be out.
We're happy it's been easing off.
Yeah, gradually.
Almost 4 records.
It is.
We started from a high 34.
Yeah.
And recall that this president in his 2025 budget speech said he's committed to bringing it down to 15%. When you do that progression, you know that there's a precedent at work.
Let's wrap this up now. What are your projections? What's your outlook generally? It's the last quarter of the year already, and you know, we're looking towards 2026. Like I said earlier, my first question, it's a pre-election year, and many think once we get to 2026,
well, I'll stay with the results and indicators from the second quarter.
All right.
You know, they're looking really strong. The manufactured goods,
we saw that.
The trade surplus, really important. The trade surplus, really important. You're looking at our external reserves at 41 billion. You're looking at our surplus from 4 billion to 23 billion,
23
or thereabout. I'll stay with those indicators because those are the clear markers about an economy that is recovering and an economy that is not recovering. I'm going to stay with that. And you look at the food prices tapering down, the inflation rate tapering down. You know, it's not all uhuru yet, but when you take these indicators, you see the success of the microeconomics. You see the attempt to also balance the micro in taking care of the people. So I expect that the last quarter, those indicators will speak to how the vulnerables, how the cost of living has come down. And I think that we're going to get there.
Mr. Sunday Dare, Special Advisor to President Bola Tinubu on Media and Public Communications, the former Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you so much for starting the week with us on Business Nigeria. We appreciate this.
Thank you so much.
All right, then. We will take a